Welcome to the Deer Wizard Podcast, conversation shaping the deer industry. I'm your host, Josh Newton, the Deer Wizard. Through interviews, advocacy, and industry news, we deliver field-proven insights to help producers build better herds. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Deer Wizard Podcast. Axis deer. Yeah. Axis deer are one of the most fascinating species in North American cervid industry. Originally native to India, they've become firmly established in the United States, especially across Texas, where they've developed into a thriving exotic deer market. What started primarily as hunting ranch species has evolved into serious breeding business, with producers focusing on genetics, herd development, and expanding opportunities within the exotic cervid market. Axis also bring a completely different biology compared to whitetails. They're capable of breeding year-round, which changes how producers think about herd management and production. Today, we're joined by my buddy from Blessed Biome, Chris Methner, to talk about the growth of the Axis deer market in the United States, what it takes to raise them successfully, and where the Axis breeding business may be headed in the future. Let's get into it. Chris, welcome back to the Deer Wizard Podcast.
Thank you, man. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you on. We did a show talking bass. I want to shift gears and I want to talk about some deer. This show is going to be a little different. We're going to touch on some whitetails, but I want to learn about Axis deer. It's not a totally foreign species to me, but I'm not versed on the Axis deer business and really the species. So give us a little background into your consulting business and we'll get into the breeding side of things and where we're at today.
Yeah. So on the wildlife management side, we try to cover just about every aspect of wildlife management, and wildlife ranching, all the way from the real estate transactions to the development of the property, habitat work, and everything that goes into that, travel corridors and nutrition and genetics and all the way through. And so with that, that's kind of what sprung, selectively breeding Axis deer, because the properties that I manage, I want to be able to offer the best I can of the species, and Axis kind of the, whitetail's king down here, but Axis is right below them as far as popularity goes, and then table fare as well. And so so we just, as far as wildlife management goes, we try to cover just about every aspect of it.
Nice. Whitetail is king. Whitetail will always be king. I'm just going to put that out front.
That's right. That's right.
So I've seen Axis deer. I don't know how to evaluate them because I'm not really familiar with like the antler configuration. Walk us through what that looks like when you're evaluating an Axis deer, even maybe the origins of the Axis deer, where it came from, why Texas is the place for it, et cetera.
Yeah. So they came over from India, and they're a hardy species. They can browse and they can graze. In other words, whitetail don't have the proper enzymes to digest grass very well. Where Axis, they can take advantage of both. And so, they've done very well in Texas and they're very popular, but they generally drop singles versus doubles. But from what I've seen out of them, the mortality rates are so low, they keep up. Right. And so,
I see.
When we first started, I didn't know much about them other than I thought they were really cool species and I liked them a lot. But we just looked at, antler traits and said, man, we need some big framed, long beamed, wide bucks. And so as we dove into it, you start really kind of trying to fine tune that and figure out what traits make the highest scoring animals and those things. And kind of what we learned is everybody judges Axis down here, at least, or not everybody, but generally when they describe an Axis buck, they say, hey, he's a 34-inch Axis buck, which they're just talking about main beam length only. or he's 32 or he's 40 is like crazy exceptional.
Mm.
And you would hear a lot about 40-inch bucks, but I've seen
They never
one,
pulled
I
the
think.
tape.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. There's very few, and so, which that's one of the traits, right? But well, kind of what we learned is, uh, you know, generally your highest scoring bucks have the longest tines. It may not have that 38-inch main beam, but so we really, you generally have a brow tine and then what they call a caudal, which is a second tine off the main beam there. And finding long caudals was the hardest trait to really locate is something that and once you start, I don't know if it's just me, maybe once I started searching for that,
Yeah.
it just now it's the most beautiful trait on the deer to me, and so we started really trying to select it, right, like big wide frames with long caudals and long brows, and breeding those kind of traits into them. And so it's evolved into that very going from, hey, that's a big deer, look, walking across the pasture, to, hey, man, he's got 13-inch caudals and it's this wide, and that's
Yeah.
that's an exceptional animal.
All right, because I've never scored an axis deer. I'm going to put the pieces together, and then you're going to fill in the places I miss. So we
Right.
got main beam lengths.
Yeah.
We got the brow tine lengths.
Yeah.
We got the caudals, and you have an inside measurement.
Yeah.
Where is the inside measurement taken? Tip to tip on the beams?
Widest point.
Widest point, which is could be the tips, but it's the widest point.
Yeah.
And then how do this, like, there's circumferences? How many of those do you get?
There's two. Yeah. So the base is actually around the burr.
Okay.
And then you go up and take another one.
So the second one's in between the brow tine and the caudal.
That's correct.
Halfway, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So there's not a lot there to score.
No. Okay. If you like 170-inch axis is really big. 180 inches is absolutely huge.
Just so to give you some thoughts. Yeah, because there's six. They're just six. They're set. What? Yeah, they're 6 points. Basically, they have 6 point.
They're 6 points. Yeah, and there are some with extras. Obviously, it's kind of rare, but but not all. Generally they're a 6 point animal. That's great.
Yeah. So when you how big are these guys? Like, how big are your kind of bigger body males? Where do they weigh in at?
They're like an older, mature it's kind of similar to whitetail. I mean, they're whitetail.
A whitetail in Texas or Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Texas. Yeah, definitely not Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Yeah.
But 200 pounds would be a large male.
Okay.
I think the majority are, the least that I have, are 160 to 180 probably.
And so those matures would be like 4 years old or older, basically.
Yeah, I think they're older. Yeah, so it's so early in this breeding industry that the largest bucks are still in the pasture.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so and they're very stress prone animals, even more so than a whitetail. And so converting a pasture breeder buck into a breeding facility is not easy, and so it's an interesting process, but yeah, so they I guess what I'm trying to say is it takes a lot more to breed them than just, hey, chunking them in a pen and they're good to go. Like, you can go catch this big buck on the pasture and keep him alive and with a helicopter and get him into a breeder pen and he's going to be fine. And so it like I said, the biggest bucks are probably still out in the pasture.
Gotcha. What does diet look like in a breeding facility?
Yeah, so it's a pelleted ration. It's actually the same pelleted ration we use for whitetail. A little bit lower protein, but and then they graze, and so we have pens with grass in them, and then we usually feed hay year round as well.
So it's similar. Like, they seem to do well with call it the traditional whitetail diet.
That's correct.
So it's that's interesting, because like I try to go through every show and say CWD one time, just because like that is the main impetus of our pain, I think, from a regulatory side and in the deer world. So the conversion, obviously, we've seen a ton of attrition because of chronic wasting disease regulations, especially in Texas where you are. And so the transition from, whitetail pasture and maybe adding access in as opposed to continuing in the whitetail space, I think has picked up a little bit. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's an easy transition for property owners.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Gotcha. Have you I suspect reproductive work is starting to pick up with artificial insemination and possible embryo work and stuff like that. Are you guys doing some of that? What does that
No,
look like? No.
we've only live covered so far. Now there are some guys that have, and I think success obviously was poor at first, but
Yeah.
it seems that with some bottle raised females, at least you hear that they're doing better. But for us, we have collected the very best breeder bucks we can possibly collect, and are depending on live breeding at this point. And
Gotcha.
I think eventually we'll start dabbling into some AI work, but I really I'm satisfied with what we breeding sire wise, and so I don't really have a need to right now, and I'm not sure. There's so many unknowns,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure what it does to their cycle, and there's enough there that like I said, if as long as I'm happy with what I'm breeding, I'm okay with live covering.
Walk us through the breeding cycle.
They so I didn't know anything about their cycles going into this, but from what I can tell, uh, they'll continually cycle as long as there's a sire there. And so, like for example, I've got a 50-acre buck pasture, and I've kicked a couple of the real wild does out there that don't want in the breeder facility, and I watch them fawn, and somewhere between that 25 to 30 days time frame, you see her getting chased, and so I think it's year round, and I think it's probably right in there in the upper 20s. Is when they'll cycle again. Now what we have done in our breeder program there, you have with that you have bucks that are hardhorned at different times of the year, and obviously hunting down here in the summer is way too hot. It's not desirable, right? And there seems to be a large deficit in big winter bucks that are hardhorned during the winter time, normal hunting whitetail season. And so we've tried. We are cycling our does, or we're putting bucks on our does, like in early fall to try to make sure their offspring are winter bucks.
What is gestation?
It's about 8 months, a little bit longer than whitetail.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like 220-ish.
Yeah.
30-ish days.
230 days.
Sorry. You have winter bucks and summer bucks. This is foreign to me. What is that?
Yeah, so you'll have bucks that are, like even in my 50-acre pasture, there's bucks that are hardhorn right now, and there's bucks that just dropped antlers, and there's bucks that are 60% grown. That's the one good thing about it is how exciting it is in the whitetail breeding.
So you just get it 365. You're like, come on, bring it on.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. But like I said, we are now as it evolves. I've taken a bunch of bucks that I felt like had potential make a breeder that were wild caught and put them in that 50-acre pasture to kind of get them adapted to our facility or our area, right? And used to some equipment and things going around to where I can convert them into a breeder pen if need be. And so that's why there's so many different growth cycles in there. But if we've got it figured out on cycling does and bucks, and hopefully the majority of our bucks will be hardhorned in the winter.
Gotcha. Yeah, I suspect that's desirable. Everything we're essentially doing for stocking and the hunting world. People like all these animals eventually will be harvested and eaten.
And a big part down here in the whitetail and the axis, like for what I do, a big part of what we do is improving the genetic pool or
Mm.
establishing the genetic pool with improved genetics. And so utilizing bred does is something, even in the Axis, that's where most of my clientele, they want to purchase bred does, and they're bred to our, these bigger sires, and just try to improve that genetic pool there, and so that's a big part of what goes on there, and a big part of the market. And then usually we'll put a buck on those does, and
Yeah.
so.
How long is this? Is this like this is relatively new, right? So
Yeah.
how long has Axis breeding and the capacity that you're talking about been going on, really?
I think there's probably were a handful of guys doing it for numerous years, but um, to this capacity for most people, I don't think 5 years maybe
Oh,
for
so it's
most. There's a few.
super new.
Yeah. There's a few guys, but that, like I said, have been doing it for a very long time. But I think we've been doing it for 3, and there's not a whole lot of Axis breeders out there,
Mm.
just so.
So you said 180 is a giant.
Uh-huh.
We've seen what whitetails can do. We've seen what elk can do. We've seen what red deer can do. What's the top in the Axis world? Where do you see
I
it
don't.
going? It's
Yeah, I don't
200.
know.
It's 200 the
Yeah, that
number.
would be great. Yeah. It'll be
How big
interesting to
is
see.
that?
That's huge. I mean, that would be just a
We talking
phenomenal.
like 45s on the beams and 50 inches wide with 15, 16-inch coddles and same on brows or something like that? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, that would just be a, you know, anomaly. That would be a phenomenal animal. But we'll see. There's so many unknowns, and I think a lot of your biggest Axis bucks right now. And this is probably the way the whitetail was early on. That they're old. I mean, they're like,
Mm.
I think they're 7 and 8,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 9. I mean, they're older deer, and so even your early maturing genetics, it's going to take us a long time to really dial some of that in, and dial in, like we talked about on the fish, the maternal lines, and that just takes it takes forever. And so
Yeah.
it's what's intriguing about it. Like, if you can build an original line that you believe, how, I mean, very passionate about genetics, and um, if you can build a line that you believe's one of the best out there, that's intriguing.
Yeah, it is.
And it's something you offer your clients.
Right. Uh, do you think are you actively working and kind of specializing in that space? Do you think that's where the future is for you?
What's that? Genetic
Axis,
improvement? Oh,
yeah, genetic improvement and Axis deer.
yeah. I mean, it's one portion of it. What kind of stemmed it for me was, um, my goal in the long term is to purchase properties, develop it into a wildlife ranch, and sell it as a all in house. Right. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of where I want to be eventually. Uh, and with that, I want to stock those properties with something nobody else has, from the fish to the Axis to the whitetail, everything. And it kind of, what I would envision there is, it hopefully would take off. It'd be a branded type thing, like,
Yeah.
hey, they put this together, and this is some of the best genetics in all these species that you can possibly get a hold of, but I'm producing it myself. You know what I mean? And so that's
Yeah.
kind of what stems it for me. And in the meantime, like, uh, my customer base, that's who purchases our bred doe axis. I've only been selling. I mean, really, last year was the first year started selling bred does. Um, and there was I mean, we sold everything we wanted to sell, and we'll come up just like a whitetail. You try to move them the second trimester, and so here pretty soon we'll be moving bred does again, and we've got commitments on the majority of those. And so there's been a really good response to it, which I was really kind of unsure what that would be. Um, but people seem to want improved genetics on axes, and like I said, they seem to be, as far as popularity, right below a whitetail.
So we're stocking 20-pound bass and 200-inch Axis deer.
Yeah, yeah. One day
You're speaking my language, dude. I like
yeah,
it. Yep.
that
That's
would be
awesome.
awesome. Yeah.
Um, So what is as axis deer is kind of new, there's obviously established other species to look at and say, okay, here's the marketplace for those. How is access different? Like, are there similarities? Like, can we have specialty antler chandeliers with these axis deer? Right. Obviously, they have beautiful coats. Right. They're very different from almost
Yeah.
every other species. What are those kind of? Uh, I call them functions, but like, what are these smaller kind of ancillary pieces of the access business that maybe you're starting to identify that can bring all in to have a little bit better profit margin on the animals?
Yeah, really, I haven't dove into that much. I mean, we've kind of stayed on the genetic improvement side, but I
Mm-hmm.
thought, just thought process wise is I think off air you mentioned that how popular the meat is.
Mm,
It's incredibly popular, and then most people rank it as number one. And then, is there a way to create a processed animal, that
mm-hmm.
for food consumption? I think that would be something intriguing. I haven't dove into that very deep. I could see a scenario where if you were able to graze um, axis and grow them, that may be profitable. I don't know, but I've put a little bit of thought process into that. Just like I said, I primarily stay on providing properties with improved genetics is
Sure.
where my whole push has been.
Yeah, and that I mean that makes sense. It has the most kind of long-term viability because it's new, right?
Yeah,
And there will be, like any other market, there has to be maturation, right?
yeah,
The access genetic market will look very different in 10 years than it
yeah.
does today. And um, Texas is a big place. And I said, now, like, will these, like, what is the range? Like, do you think physically for this animal? Like, can I raise them where I am?
No, they don't seem to. They do not like cold weather, so they would have a really hard time up there. But you did mention that. I guess a friend of yours has some up on the New York line. Is that what you
No,
said earlier?
he went down to Texas and
Oh, gotcha. Say,
hunted
goodness
one
gracious.
here
Yeah.
down in Texas and brought me some meat back, and that was the first time I
Okay.
had it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, that would be so. Um, so it's a southern range, just simply due to temperature tolerances.
yep,
But most of the axes in Texas are west. You don't see many axes in East Texas,
hmm,
and there's some south, um, but I'm in Southeast Texas, obviously, and so uh, they've done very well, and I have not had any issues so far. And so, uh, but as far as free ranging axis go, the majority are kind of in the hill country area and Junction, Sonora. That's where you see a lot of the biggest bucks, Rock Springs, out in that country.
they have them in Mexico as well.
I bet they do. I
Yeah,
don't know for sure though, to be honest.
interesting.
Yeah,
I wonder. I suspect they do really well over into New Mexico and Arizona, Southern California.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, I would think so. Do you think we'll start seeing them stretch east across a lot of the Gulf states? Um,
Yeah, I mean, there's a few guys in Florida that are kind of tinkering with breeding them, and I think that like that state in particular, they would just do phenomenally and I could see where uh, I think their whitetail, hunting operations do very well down there. But as far as an entertainment aspect, having access as well, I think would be great. So yeah, I think you've seen it stretch somewhat east, and there's a little bit in Louisiana, it seems like, but not a tremendous amount. We do get quite a few calls from guys out of Louisiana with wildlife ranches that want access deer, and so yeah, I mean, I think the popularity's there, and as long as the temperatures are conducive to them, then I think yeah, they definitely could spread all over.
yeah, I always think about the Gulf states. In the whitetail world, like Georgia and Mississippi are kind of non-existent, right? It's all old grandfathered places. There's some big ranches in there, but
Yeah.
they're existing from 40 years ago, and they're not into the specific kind of genetic improvement that you and I kind of specialize in.
Right.
Um, it would be interesting to see those states, right? Especially Georgia and Mississippi. I mean, they have huge whitetail populations. They're million plus states somewhere around there. And if they have the climate for it, I just think the Gulf states generally, like, they're kind of uniquely positioned. Maybe not this week. If you're listening or watching, it's
Yeah.
pretty much cold across the country this
Yeah.
week. And what'd you say it was? 20 degrees at your place this
Yeah, we were
morning?
23 this morning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
20
Yeah.
23.
Yeah.
Not going to the beach and
Yeah.
doing any red fishing today
That's right.
in Southeast Texas, but I think the Gulf states offer a lot in the way of cervid reproduction and breeding and management. So it'd be cool to see those things kind of pick up a little bit. Um, Now, I've seen the fallow market kind of take off a bit in Texas, and again, all this kind of stems around the regulatory environment. Do you think there's I know they're different, but like, is there competition between like Axis and fallow as far as like the genetic improvement side and the breeder side, or what does that look like?
You mean like competition between the breeders as far as this?
No, not the animals physically competing, but like as far as like people breeding them and stocking them, what do you think those market dynamics could look like longer
You know,
term?
most people, at least most of the calls I get, and most people want whitetail and exotics down here, and it's fallow are fairly popular, axis are popular, oryx are popular,
Mm,
gimspot. There's there's a handful of species, black buck's another one, and a lot of these guys want all of those, right?
mm,
And so there's almost a little market for each species. It seems like it just kind of depends on what you specialize in and where you sit in that market. I always felt like in any of those, you really, I wanted to be at the very top of them. I just felt like, you know, first you want to be able to produce the very best you can possibly produce,
sure.
right? But that's the safest place to be. You know, uh, I think it opens up, who you sell to in your market, right? Other breeders, ranches, and no matter what, these ranch guys, I mean, they want the best of the best in many cases, especially down here.
Hmm.
I don't know about it, where you're at, but there's a lot of money in Texas, and so a lot of times finances are not the issue,
They
or
pump it out
not.
of the ground,
That's right. Yeah.
shows up in the mailbox.
That's right. That's
Yeah, I
right.
like it.
So yeah.
Well, it's a testament, right? Because like, people with resources want to um they want to improve habitat. They want to make
Yep.
sure that the legacy of these ranches is preserved, and there's no better way to enjoy them than with animals.
Yep.
I mean, that's like the nature of man. I think, we've
Yeah.
been coexisting like since the beginning of time with animals.
Yep. No, you're right. I'm glad you touched on that too, because you're exactly right. It's not, we've been talking about genetics and stocking species and things, but there's so much more that goes into it than that. And, and I don't have a single customer that's not willing to do habitat improvement and make sure that these ranches are developed properly to house these, to habit these species, right? And so, there's, like you said, there's a lot of conservation effort in it, and preserving the ranching lifestyle. It's a lot of it's shifted uh, to wildlife, into whitetail and exotics and those things. And so the exotic market is blown up down here. And some of it has to do with the whitetail hurting so bad, but a lot of it doesn't. I mean, there's a strong demand for multiple species in the ranching world,
Yeah, it's interesting when you kind of take a step back and look at it. I think a lot of times game ranching is misunderstood, right?
Yep.
And specifically on the conservation side, there are cases where like we are working to conserve certain species, right? Like that is conservation. And but the second order effects of that end up being this like attention to improving habitat, which has so many ramifications for almost all other species, right? Like
Yeah.
I remember this the scene in the show Yellowstone sticks out, right? Where Kevin Costner's the governor of Montana. He walks in, he's got his cabinet people there, and they're like, he like picks up the paper and he says to the guy, like, there's a sage grouse restoration project and they're putting a solar farm in, right? And something about the sage grouse population being, down, 1 million birds or whatever it was. And he's like, what do you think's going to happen to the sage grouse when you put the solar farm in? And the guy looks back at him and he says, I'm paraphrasing, he says, there's no study that says that this is going to affect the population of the sage grouse. And Costner looks back and he's like, what do they do with the sage to put the solar farm in? And the guy's like, well, they clear it. Where does the sage grouse live? They live in the sage trees. So if there's no sage trees, there's no sage grouse. And then of course he fires the whole panel and
Right.
he walks out and he's just like, what's more scary to me than that statement was you thinking that was common sense or something
Yeah.
along those lines.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I always kind of think about that, and
Yeah.
I think about all the good work that, various people like yourself are doing to make sure that these properties are set up not only for recreation, but like that recreation is the mechanism that provides for all these other animals. Can you just kind of touch on maybe some of your thoughts on what that is and what that looks like for you?
Yeah. I mean, as you said, the more, um, I look at it, the more acres dedicated to wildlife management, the better, right?
Mm,
And how does that work? And obviously, finances plays a big role in that. It just does, and so uh, I think there has to be a market for all this stuff, right? And a lot of people I don't think want to hear that, you're selling animals, or you're doing this or that, but that's what drives it. And uh, the other thing is property values and things of that nature, right? If we develop a wildlife ranch and it's stocked properly and it does this and that, well, there's a lot of value that comes up with that property, and transactions, financial transactions, things. And so, and even the development of that property, right? Like that's all, it's primarily rural uh, economic impacts, right? And so, or running it from day to day, even once the
mm,
sale's over, and so, um, I look at it a lot of times as you know, how do you get the most acres dedicated to wildlife management first off, and what economic impact it has in the rural part of Texas or Louisiana or wherever we're working, and I believe it's great, very high amount. And that's what's so scary about the whitetail end down here is, you know, in my mind, there's not a greater management tool available for a landowner. Like if I'm able to bring in bred does with certain genetics for generations, my production is going to be was going to increase tremendously. And and but there's so much risk with it now. It's I get every call I get, they want those animals, but I have to explain, like, this is realistically, this is the risk. And when you start talking about 5, 10, 20, 30, $40 million properties, um, man, it's a tough decision for those guys, and it risks those things. And so what happens, right? Like, what if the risk outweighs, then what happens to that property? I mean, are they going to dedicate it to a wildlife ranch, and with the potential of shooting 130, 140-inch deer? Probably not.
mm-hmm.
And so what happens then? And all that rural economic impact that could have happened with the full development of that and the running of it, and it functioning as a ranch, what happens to all that money? Where does it go? Does it leave the rural area? And does the ranch turn into something else because you can't provide that, and I think it's that important. And so that's scary, and I don't know. That's where I know we don't want to get into regulations a whole lot, but that's where it seems to be a disconnect with the governing departments,
Mm.
and I don't think they understand that, that all right, maybe they do. I don't know, but that's what's scary to me.
Yeah. It's a tough subject because, like Texas is the home to the largest whitetail population in the world.
Yeah.
Y'all got over 5 million whitetails there.
Yep.
And so there's ecological impact, there's conservation efforts, there's just like natural hunting heritage. You can go through all the list of things. And really, I think to your point, like there has to be an economic driver for all the things we've talked about. Conservation. We'll just use that term. And you mentioned kind of these second order effects. And so if the guy's not willing to spend the 20 or 30 million dollars to develop this ranch, not only does it take away from the economic impact of that local economy, right, for a long time, probably
Yep.
generations,
Yep.
but it's got to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so what is that? Is it a housing development? Is it
Yep.
a shopping mall? And I'm not saying those things are bad. I live in a house. I've been to a mall, right? Like I'm not
Yeah.
saying that's bad. But if you look at places that are sparsely populated, right, in very rural areas, you pretty much have a limited amount that you can support a local economy from, right? And it's either cows, right? Mostly. I'm not saying other things won't be there, or wildlife. And like, not a knock against the beef guys. I eat a lot of beef.
Mm-hmm.
Cows are boring. Wildlife is super cool. And
Yeah.
like, I think all the cattle guys would say that too, because they love wildlife, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so when you look at these regulations, it's hard to it's hard to know. I think we can see pieces of it. It's hard to know what that looks like long term. And I think your reservations are accurate, right? Like I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
And you're like, I know you're in it. Like, what do you? I mean, what does the next 10 years for Texas look like? In this ranching space. Like I know it's unknown, but like where does this go?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. It's if something doesn't give, uh, regulatory wise, the wildlife management or the wildlife ranches, I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. It's really tough to say.
I
I
mean, we're
mean,
talking about tens of thousands of jobs.
oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's
I mean,
not a small thing.
there's generally somewhere around 700,000 whitetail harvested annually in Texas. I mean, it's a gigantic uh, economic driver, right? Or conservation driver, however you want to look at that.
Sure.
It's all of that, and so I don't know if there's not some common ground found. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I really don't know.
Yeah, I try to I try to read. We're talking whitetails now. Um, I try to read some of the updates coming out of Texas Parks and Wildlife, and of course everything's rules and regs and stuff like that. And um, I can't. I'm pretty in tune with whitetail management because it's what I do, and it's all I do, and it's all I've done for a long, long time. I can't see the long term vision for what they're trying to do. I see immediate reactions. I see short term planning, but I don't see long term. And am I missing something, or like is that plan not there? There's no vision. That's I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's confusing because all right, so I'll give you an example. Inside the loop of San Antonio, one of the loops, all right, one of the inner loops, there's a park that they hit a positive, right? They're within the so in a breeding facility. Let me back up a little bit. In a breeding facility, if a positive is hit, there's a 5-year treatment. They go after the thing that left that facility and come into that facility past 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're going to jump back to this park. All right, so there were deer triple T'd, which is a trap transport and translocate permit, right? Out of this park within the past 5 years, a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, nothing. They never went after those deer. They never identified the landowners or anything, right? Okay, so that's one thing. Well, on a high fence ranch, if I'm in a trace period, I get a herd plan, and they're going to want me to test 256 white-tailed deer. That's a flat number, or whatever your 100% of your total estimated population. And you don't have a time limit. You can do it over 100 years, or you can do it in 1 year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was curious, what is the herd plan for that park, right? And I did an open records request, and there is no herd plan for the park. They do not assign herd plans to low fence properties, low fence detections. And so, but they do in the high fence scenario. And so it's really confusing to me. It's just, to your point, what is the plan? I mean, if it's on this end, if it's wide open, if on this end it's heavily controlled, if we're looking at a disease that it's inevitable to spread, or it's not unreasonable to believe that the spread has already happened. It's been detected from Colorado to Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and all three,
Sure,
majority of the states.
Yep.
What is the plan? And does increase testing, is that a solution, right? No, it's not a solution in my mind. And so I don't know. I mean, it's really confusing to me. I don't see a solution-minded, science-based plan either. I really don't.
Yeah, it's of course, I think you and I are both emotionally tied to this as well, of course. And I suspect there's literally thousands of others that rely on animals to make their livelihoods go, right?
Sure.
But like, have they canceled the, what'd you call it, TTT or TTP?
Triple T, yeah, they did. They stopped that.
So that's
movement.
done. They were like, oh,
Yeah.
well, this is easy. Okay, yeah,
we're gonna paused. Yeah,
paused, right?
Yeah.
I just you had mentioned testing. I look at testing and like, I don't think anybody has, like, I don't have an issue testing within reason, right? Like,
Yep.
I'm willing to comply with whatever regulations are put on me to safeguard the spread of CWD, right? And that's, I'm loosely defining that. But when you make it so that it's impossible to do that commerce or to make business, you just don't, you're not going to do it anymore, right? You're going to move on to something else. And so, like, if it's good for inside the fence, it's good for outside the fence, because chronic wasting disease does not know the difference between the fence sides, because there are no fence sides.
Yep.
And I think like, there's enough fence in Texas that the state's fenced, right? Like they're like, for 40 years, like, Texas invented high fence.
Yeah.
They didn't invent it, but you know what I mean? It's synonymous there. And I can't get past what, and I again, as not being a Texan, I don't understand the magnitude of this, but I'm starting to understand it. Like, this is massive. It's the biggest thing that's ever happened in the state of Texas outside of finding oil.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with that. Yeah. I don't, I'm making commentary, but it's so hard to process, right? Because like, we see other states acting in a rational manner, using science-based systems to manage CWD, right? And sounds like Texas is in this eradication phase. Well, I'm sorry, we have 50, 60 years of history. CWD, at least as of today, cannot be quote unquote eradicated. At least I think you and I are both seeing the genetic side of things, and we're saying, I don't know if eradication is possible, but certainly very low prevalence, right? Because like, it's okay. It's okay to have some CWD. Like, I just want to repeat that. This is normal. It's okay to have some CWD. You just don't want it continually growing, or spreading, right? And so, like, hey, I'm saying this, hey, Parks and Wildlife, look around, talk to some of your colleagues. There are really good projects going on across the United States. Like, get back in the USDA plan. The HCP plan. It's a good
Yeah.
program. It was designed by like the top experts in the field. It's working in like 25 states that it's implemented in, and it provides some good common sense safeguards. So it would just be really, really nice to open up my news feed on the computer, on my phone, and see something positive, as opposed to all these, just every story or every video I see is just negative, negative, negative. And I think they're gonna break the state.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna break the state.
Yeah. Yeah. What's scary, like I look at it as CWD can move a million different ways, right? Ag product, all these different
Yep.
and there's many of them that go unmonitored, and some of them there's no way to monitor, right? Like, but you look at the breeders and the volume of testing, it's like, okay, well, this is by far the most proactive group, right? They're monitoring for CWD at higher rates than anybody, exponentially.
In the
So
world.
in the
In the
world,
world.
yeah, exactly. But it's for whatever reason, in Texas, it's almost like you're held to perfection, right? Like we cut it to zero chance of moving CWD or having positives or those things, and that's what I don't understand. All right, this disease moves so many different ways. There's been 700, 600,000 plus animals harvested annually for however many years, and those carcasses have been moved all over the state for years. It's just absolutely crazy to me and to expect perfection, and uh, at some point, I think you have to say, hey, we can't expect perfection, right? Like the spread is inevitable, period. And like I said, it's my opinion. It's here. It's been here.
Yeah.
And so, eh, you know, at some point, I feel like you have to say, okay, this testing volume is enough. It's enough. Is it going to catch 100%? No, it's not going to catch 100%. But it is way more proactive than any other way this disease moves and how it's monitored. And so you know, this is the mark, right? And like I would like to see what going back to those release sites, those ranches is the scariest part to me when you start risking those properties. At some point we have to get to. I feel like we have to get to. We got to cut that risk out. Like, all right, this breeder's testing enough. Once it's released, it's over. All right, we can't tie up these properties and devalue them to a crazy amount, because of a detection or a possible detection, or having to go in and kill 100% of your population over a period of time and test it. It's crazy to me. So I hope that one day it gets there. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm not sure who needs to hear it or who needs to be affected by it for that to change. And I'm not up on the internal politics in Texas at all. But apparently the right person hasn't been harmed yet.
Yeah.
But it's coming. If they stay the course, it'll happen. And who knows? They might try to keep it quiet or sweep it under the rug, but that just doesn't work in the internet age, right? Like there are no secrets anymore. It's not possible. But hopefully some sunlight somewhere gets shined on this thing bright enough that everybody can see it. It becomes exposed, and that there is change for the betterment of whitetail. Because, like, and I am not discounting anybody that's been affected by this or the people, but the thing that hurts the most is the white-tailed deer, and that's what the regulators don't understand. The thing that hurts the most is it's the detriment of the white-tailed deer, because without hunters, the white-tailed deer, I don't want to say it doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist in its form today.
Yeah,
and you can point to any species you want in the world that's kind of got to an endangered level, if you will. You know, you can look at elephants and you can look at rhinos and you can look at the big cats over in Africa. Heck, you can look at the white-tailed deer in the early 1900s, and, you know, common sense, science-backed solutions change the population dynamics to make it the most prolific species in North America by far. I mean, you can't go from 100,000 white-tailed deer 120 years ago to 30 to 34 million today and not look back and say, well, here's the things we did.
Yeah.
And it was common sense regulation backed by science.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yep.
And so again, hopefully that sunlight shines. Yeah, I didn't I didn't know our conversation was gonna go down that road, because you know, we started on the axis deer, which I enjoyed that, and I love talking whitetails. I just hate talking about CWD, even though it's like the only thing we do. But I hope y'all start pulling through that, and there's some sort of resolution that comes out of that that's good for all the guys down there. So
yeah, sure.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you coming on the show and chatting with me about access. I think I could probably score one, which is a good thing, and I look forward to seeing some big 180s running around in your pastures.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, you bet. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, stay tuned for another episode of the Deer Wizard Podcast.